Hello and welcome to In the Days of Noor with me, Noor, where we talk about Islamic related topics and social issues. So I know that my last couple podcasts, I guess for a while, they have not focused as much or brought in as much research as I used to in the past. And that's really because I just I haven't really made it a priority to do that. I'm working on my book and I'm working on the blog and doing other research. So when it comes to the podcast, it's become a bit more casual. But you can definitely let me know what you want to hear from me. You can always send me research. I do want to do some episodes on there was a Mobeen article someone sent me. So I do want to do a few episodes on that. That'll probably take up a lot of time. So, for anyone who liked the older format, then my apologies. So I wanted to talk about the way in which the person that you choose to marry can ruin your life. And that may sound very dramatic, but of course I'm going to explain it. So I was watching this interview with a woman she's a black woman from the hood, poor, and she was able to do well in school and get into Harvard. So obviously a big accomplishment for anyone, but especially for her as a poor black woman. And so she gets into Harvard and she's talking about that experience. But, in the title of the video, then it's, how this woman, something like how she went from the hood to Harvard to prison. So, of course, while you're watching the video, you're waiting for, okay, how in the world do you go from Harvard to prison? But in my head, as soon as I saw the title, I thought, you know what? I can almost guarantee that some man is involved. Because, and it's not to say women never commit crimes on their own, but a lot of women end up in trouble with the law because of men, because of their relationships. And we know that most of the violent crimes are committed by men. This is not to degrade men, but that's just the reality. So a lot of the times women find themselves in trouble with the law. It's intertwined with men in their life. And I remember, this not too long ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, JT from it's just a woman from a rap group, but she was, rising in her success, and she ended up going to jail for some kind of fraud. So that was on her. That had nothing to do with a man. But when she came out of jail, she said that so many of the women she met were in jail because of a man, because of hiding someone's drugs, because of hiding the man himself, the criminal himself. And I know when I was growing up, I didn't know about I didn't know of any woman who had gone to jail. And I only knew one guy. I think I only knew one guy that went to jail before. But there was a book we read I think it was called The Coldest Winter or something like that. And that was the theme of the story. Now, this book was about black teenagers and, teenagers in the hood. And I think her father was a drug dealer, the main girl. And then her boyfriend was a drug dealer. And she ended up somehow getting involved, but not, oftentimes when women are involved in drug dealing, they're not involved necessarily. They're involved as an extension of their relationship. So they let the boyfriend do drugs, not do drugs, but maybe store drugs at their house or whatever, package the drugs at their house or just being in their house. Because, and I don't remember the exact law, but there's some kind of law in New York City that even if you house a drug dealer, like that in and of itself is a crime, and then you're not eligible for welfare. There's some kind of connection like that. I don't remember it completely. So a lot of women are get involved because of, as we said, an extension of their relationships. Also, I know when I was growing up, the girls that we knew who were in gangs, it was often because their boyfriend was in a gang. So it was just, again, an extension of their relationship. There's only one girl I knew of who was in a gang, and she actually fought her way into the gang, because that was sort of one of the two ways. Either you were just the girlfriend of a gang member, so you became a gang member yourself, or you fought your way into being into the gang. Now, I guess she fought other girls. I have no idea. But I know that was her story. So in listening to the story of this woman, just having those ideas in the background, I assumed that it was going to be something about a relationship. So she finally gets to the point, I think, at like the 42-minute mark. And the story is interesting, so it's not like I minded waiting for that. So she was in Harvard and dating a drug dealer. And on her campus, there were two drug dealers that didn't go to the school, but were connected, I guess, to two of the black women there, one of her being one of them. And there was some kind of drug deal gone wrong, and her boyfriend ended up shooting another drug dealer, I guess the other drug dealer. And she mentioned that Harvard did have a drug culture. I know one of my sisters who went to a majority white school also spoke about that, the drug culture on campus. I went to a majority white school for my master's program, but I didn't live on campus. So I think that when you live on campus, you're going to have a completely different experience than someone who is, transporting, is that the right word? I don't know, but, traveling there every day. So, and I think it was actually the same thing. I don't completely remember, where there was like a black boyfriend, and that was the drug dealer, and boyfriend of her roommate or something like that. So it ended up being, not to get into it too much, but anyway, she ended up leaving and going into another dorm. But a lot of these colleges, they are known to have a drug culture. But, in our society, then the way that a drug dealer and a drug user are viewed is very differently. And we know race also plays a part into that, because the way that drugs are categorized is extremely racial. So I forget the exact categories, but something like possession of crack will get you far more time than possession of cocaine. And, both of these drugs are addictive, but one is a drug that is mostly used by black people, poorer people, crack, and cocaine is used by wealthy people. And, there was a whole crack epidemic in the 80s, and which has pretty much died out, alhamdulillah. But anyway, so those drugs were treated differently, in large part because of the different users. And the most blatant case of racism and drug use is seeing the way the crack epidemic was treated, as opposed to the way, I believe the drug is methamphetamine or opioids, one of those two drugs, as opposed to how that was treated. Because, and I remember so distinctly, it was a couple of years ago when the Oprah show was still on, the show that she had on daytime television. And there was this, I think at that time it was meth. I know there is an opioid problem as well, but I think at that time it was meth. And there was all of this, just this discussion about what are we going to do about this drug problem. It's harming so many families. All of these families are addicted. I remember, subhanAllah, because I still remember how those people looked, because they were, making this stuff in their home. They were losing teeth, losing hair. They looked like they had some kind of disease, but they were affected by this drug. So there was all this talk about rehab, and we have to help people. And if you find someone in the street, like police officers, find someone in the street, just take them back home. And it's like, subhanAllah, this is so different from how they treated the crack epidemic. When it was the crack epidemic and the heroin epidemic, I think they happened around the same time. Actually, I think heroin was like 70s and crack was like 80s or something, but they probably did overlap. That it was all about a war on drugs. We have to essentially arrest people, all of these harsh sentences for people who had a problem, people who had an addiction. So the black and white treatment was so severe. And so that same thing is happening, that same kind of dynamic when it comes to the drug culture that's very well known on many of these campuses, as opposed to the people selling drugs. Now, I'm not saying the people selling drugs are always black. I have no idea. But there is still that kind of divide. And, the funny thing about a lot of white schools is that you'll notice that the way that they are placed and just sort of situated in the community, it's a weird thing. But if you sort of, they won't be very far off from the hood. Like, it's a very weird thing. If you have gone to Pratt, to Columbia, to even Howard, and Howard is a HBCU, so these are just some of the schools my siblings have gone to. I know when I was going to Columbia, there was one day when I got lost, and I ended up taking the bus too far. Like, I took it a couple stops too far. I'm not even sure why I was taking the bus. I don't even know, because I had to take the train. It's like an hour away from where we lived at the time. But maybe I guess there was some reason I thought I had to take the bus as well. But I ended up going a bit too far. And I was like, where am I? Because all of a sudden I was in the hood. I was in a black neighborhood, lower SES. Even though I don't want to paint it as all bad, because the interesting thing about just finding myself in that neighborhood, it's like all of a sudden it was like, that song from Cheers, like going to a place where everybody knows your name, like people saying, hey, how are you? And like, I was clearly in a neighborhood. I was no longer in the college area. And so it's just very interesting, because I've seen that dynamic many, many times. You go a little too far, quote unquote, and you're in the hood. So it's like the college class and the hood and the poorer class can end up commingling in certain situations, and drugs can be one of those situations. And there's a lot more risk in selling drugs than in taking drugs, because even when you're taking drugs, there's a possibility for people to view you as a victim, whereas when you're selling drugs, no one really cares, especially if you're black. So she's dating this man who's, I think I already told the whole story actually, that she was dating the man who is a drug dealer. Drug deal gone wrong. Apparently he shot another drug dealer, or I'm not sure if it's exactly a drug deal gone wrong if he shot another drug dealer, but anyway, he ended up shooting someone else, a young black man, apparently someone who actually went to the school. So I don't know if he's selling drugs, and he goes to the school. But anyway, she, I believe, hides him in her dorm, and then helps him get away. Now, I don't want to sort of overly criminalize this woman, because I think if you're in a panic situation like that and your loved one, even though this is just a boyfriend, but your loved one commits a crime, I think in the moment, I wouldn't be surprised if most of us would just be thinking, how do we get away? How do we fix this? How do we solve this? And then maybe thereafter you realize, oh my God, because I highly doubt that when you call the taxi to get them out of the situation, that you're like, oh, I'm trying to help them escape in a getaway car, right? you're probably just panicking and thinking of the short term, how do I get this person out of the situation? So long story short, then she goes to jail for 2.5 years, and she's never able to get her degree. Now, this story, I thought it was just so valuable because I think there's a very important lesson to learn here. A lot of us in this day and age, we want to focus on our academia and we want to focus on our career. But I think that focusing on who you marry should never go out of style. It should never not be a focus, especially for us as women, because who you marry, and again, this is her boyfriend, but it does matter in the non-Muslim context. But in general, who you marry, who you allow yourself to associate with, can be your downfall, right? It can lift you up or it can be your downfall. And I think it's really important that we don't forget that. One thing I've realized, and I know that this can probably apply to other people, but I've just seen it with Black people. I'm not saying only Black people do it. But sometimes people will rise in their economic status, but not rise in their social status, or vice versa. They will rise in their social status, but not rise in their economic status. And it's such a missed opportunity. That word, or the terminology SES, socioeconomic status, is so valuable. Because it doesn't tell the whole story, but that tells a lot about how your life, what kind of quality of life you're going to have. If you're blessed, if you work hard enough to move up in your circle economically, you should also be looking to move up socially. If you're blessed to move up socially, which is going to Harvard, going to a great school, you should be looking for the great economic opportunities. And this is for myself as well. I mean, I don't want to say it's too late for me, but it's too late in the sense that I'm not in school anymore. But I would tell anyone, if you're going to a Ivy League school, look for those opportunities, get close to your teachers, look for the internships. And alhamdulillah, I did do some of that when I was in grad school, but because I wanted to get into Islamic studies right after school, I just didn't fully take advantage of those opportunities. And, for me, it's like I can only do but so much. If I worked right after school, I wouldn't have been able to go to Jordan. And, so I chose which one I wanted to do, and I made the necessary sacrifice. But I think that in general, if there's not something else that's really calling you, but in general, it's really valuable to try to raise both our social status and our economic status when you have the opportunity. So a show that I love, I mean, it's so old, but this show Frasier that I love, I shouldn't say I love it, that's over the top, but the show Frasier that I watch still every once in a while, but it's really old, from, I don't know, maybe the 90s. I think it's earlier than the 2000s, so maybe the 90s. But anyway, there's an episode of Frasier where this guy, he comes into money, so he's suddenly rich. I forget what exactly he does, but I think he becomes like the studio manager or something where Frasier works. So if you don't know about Frasier, the show, it's essentially about a psychiatrist who then becomes like a psychiatrist on the radio and moves to Seattle, becomes a psychiatrist on the radio, lives with his father and his brother, sort of reconnects with his past. Seattle is where he's from. But he's also a part of the funny dynamic of the show is that the father is sort of socially of a lower class. The father was a cop and his mother was a psychologist. But their sons, who is Frasier and Niles, they have really high class taste because of their father and their mother's hard work, and their mother taking them to museums and they going to private schools and all that. So that's part of the amusement of the show. But in this particular episode, this person who comes into wealth, then he realizes that he doesn't fit in. So he's raised his economic status, but his social status hasn't changed, right? He doesn't know who, I don't know, maybe he doesn't know anything about Freud, or he doesn't know anything about, man, do I know any, like, I'm trying to think of any sort of fancy, I don't know, he doesn't know anything about opera or fine dining, etc., right? Almost like if you could imagine a Trump kind of character, like just very, like Trump almost has this interesting positioning where he's low class in a sense, like so people can relate to him who are on the bottom, quote unquote, but he's very wealthy, right? So it's that sort of weird dynamic, or the dynamic of a lot of rappers, right? What we call new money. So they come into money, but they haven't been schooled at the private schools, and they haven't traveled the world, and they don't know about, you know, the fine dining and opera and all of that stuff. So the guy comes to Frasier so that Frasier can teach him how to be a part of the social class that he not really that he finds himself in, but a part of the social class that is tied to his economic status. And you know, that's why sometimes someone can become wealthy but they don't necessarily fit in, or you could even be poor and you don't necessarily fit into the social class that aligns with your economic class. Because maybe even though you were poor, your parents still wanted you to get a good education, and they saved up their money so you could go to, like, even my parents, we weren't poor, we were working class, but we were even within my family, like including my extended family, my family has traveled a lot. I mean, when I was younger, it was unheard of for someone to just go overseas, go to an Arab country, like all of these places that were seemingly quote unquote exotic. Hamnida, my sisters were going to France and Morocco and all those places, and that, you know, all of us would eventually get to go to. So and you know, the way I'm using these terms, and this is not like trying to boast anyone or put down anyone, I'm just kind of using it in a matter of fact kind of way. So it kind of elevated our social status because there was a level of culture and education that we were able to obtain, even though we lived in the same, even though we were part of the same economic class as everyone else in our neighborhood. But the idea to a lot of people, I mean, people would be so like kind of shocked and interested, like, oh, you went to Jordan, you went to like the Arab world, like these places were so far out to them, you know, they only knew about these places through the news, which is why sometimes they'd be so shocked, especially because we were going to Arab countries, and to them, their only perception of Arab countries is that they're dangerous. So to me, it's so valuable to do what you can. If you have the opportunity to be at Harvard, why would you still want to connect yourself? How can I put it? Why would you choose in the places where you're able to choose? Why would you choose to still connect yourself to poverty? Right? So you can't choose your family, and you shouldn't want to. Like, it's not about forgetting where you came from. No, you still are connected to your family. You may still have friends from that, you know, from back home and all that stuff, from your older neighborhood. But to choose a romantic partner that's going nowhere in life, you know, at least as far as you can tell in that moment, he's dealing drugs. He has nowhere good to take you except to take you down, right? So why would you choose that for yourself? And I think sometimes there is actually a mental split that happens with people. And, you know, I'm sorry to use this example, I know. But whatever happened to, we probably all unfortunately know like things that we shouldn't know in terms of celebrity gossip, just because sometimes you see it scrolling and then you click on it and you listen, and then you're like, why did I just listen to that? But anyway, whatever. It's a good example of the rapper Nicki Minaj. I found something that she said so profound and worth thinking about, is that So she got married to her husband she got married to her husband who has like no, what do they call that? SubhanAllah. Whatever they call your wealth. Like, he had recently gotten out of jail. This is a guy from the hood, a guy she knew growing up. So his economic status, his social status is very low. And again, I'm not using that in a judgment way. I'm using it as a matter of fact way. So she marries this guy, and, a lot of people are saying, why would you marry this guy? He has no money. He's been in and out of jail, etc. And just something profound that I thought she said is that he knew me before I was Nicki Minaj. And I thought that was profound because that shows that sometimes there's a disconnect with us. Like, we get to a better place economically, but we still feel socially connected to where we came from. And I'm not even going to say that's bad, but I think it can be, if you're thinking about your future and you're thinking about someone bringing good into your life, emotionally, socially, I guess they can bring good into your life. But if you want sort of a more holistic good, right? If you want someone to meet you where you actually are now and not where you used to be or who you used to be, then I think it is really dangerous to still see yourself in the light of, oh, he knew me before the money, but like, you should have changed and evolved with the money you have. Like, what have you done with the money? And that happens sometimes as well, that people get money and all they know is to buy a bigger car and well, not a bigger car, a fancier car and a bigger house and more shoes. Like, they don't know what to do with their money in terms of actually planning well financially for themselves, for their future, because they're still stuck in who they were. Like, they haven't utilized their money to better themselves. So all they know is, well, when I was younger, I wanted the name brand bag, and so now I can afford it. I'm going to get 10 bags, right? There was a woman, and this is another example, and I guess I'll just end with this. There was a woman who had won the lottery, another, woman from the hood, poor black woman. And she won the lottery, like, this was a huge lottery. She bought herself this huge house. Mind you, it's just her. She has a child, but the child lives with her mother. It's just her, and I don't remember if it was a boyfriend or a husband. And she bought like all of this just extravagant stuff. And I feel like, I'm not completely sure, but the lottery was just so huge. Like, if it was a moderate lottery, then she would have already been out of money, because she was just spending money like crazy. And she had spent even like millions of dollars, I believe, or a huge amount, bailing out her, and I don't remember if it was a boyfriend or husband, in and out of jail, because she's still connected to this guy from the hood. So it's like, oh, your boyfriend, if you were in the hood, if you were still poor, your boyfriend goes to jail. Let me just say husband, because I don't remember which one it was. Your husband goes to jail. Well, you try to bail him out with whatever little money. You probably won't have all of it, but you try to work and eventually get him out. Or maybe you can't get him out, but you do what you can, right? Okay, now you have $1 million. Okay, I guess I'll spend this $1 million to keep bailing him out of jail. Like, you don't change. You don't realize that, oh, I have more money now. I can try to elevate my circle. I can try to elevate my husband as well if he's willing to come on the path. But to stay where I am socially, then you have to ask yourself, what's the benefit of the money if you're going to still stay in exactly the same framework? And the same thing for the woman who goes to Harvard. What's the benefit of going to Harvard if you're going to stay in exactly the same framework and allow yourself to be brought down by a relationship? And, I think she is doing good work now in sociology or something like that. But I just think we have to remember, it's not just money and it's not just education. It's also our relationships that can elevate us and bring us down. We shouldn't think, okay, I'm going to be really smart and work really hard and go to Harvard. And I'm going to be really smart and work really hard and get this great job. But when it comes to relationships, oh, well, you can't help with what your heart wants, right? I'm just going to fall in love with whoever. No, we should be smart with every aspect of our life. And for me, I think it's unfortunate that we've let that go. Like, of course, now we want women to get an education, and if they have career goals, go after that. But we cannot underestimate how damaging a bad relationship can be. We can't give our daughters, raise them to be so smart in every aspect of their life except their relationship. Who you marry is such a huge deal. And, I just feel like that needs to be preached more to women. You cannot be so smart in every aspect of your life except your relationship. So thank you guys for listening. I would love to know your thoughts, inshallah ta'ala. This subject is just really important to me and something that I'm constantly trying to teach myself, because I think that just so many of us, we don't learn how to choose a good spouse. I mean, if we're fortunate, we grow up with parents and our family intact, and that helps. But I think it should be something that is also taught and advised in the same way we would teach and advise someone on where to go to school and what job to get. Thank you guys for listening. Take care.